So my first question is, you've recently received an award for your contribution to the contemporary dance field. Could you tell us a bit about that?
The recognition came from the President of India, and it is an annual recognition for a contemporary dancer. Now in India, the word contemporary is very, very broad. It doesn't represent quite what the West thinks of that word. In fact, there is a binary in the West about what is classical and what is contemporary. In India, it is anybody that is wanting to depart from their guru or from their learned tradition and wants to experiment or wants to explore. However, my award has come after I crossed the age of 60, which means I've been doing this kind of work for 30 years. And it has been, I think for me, a journey from my classical tradition in Bharatanatyam and Mohiniyattam and Kathakali, and then my years in New York City as a television producer when I did not dance. And when the disruption happened in my personal life and I found that I was going to be a single mother with 2 young children, and I decided I needed to return to dance, I had to find a new kind of language that aligned my personal experience, my politics that had changed, and the dance that my muscles and my body knew.
Right.
So my journey has been, in a way, using the foundational aspects of my learned vocabularies, but also to include, like a thread or almost like quilting, all the other physical vocabularies that I learned over the years. I learned therapeutic yoga. I learned Tai Chi and Qigong. I learned Kalari for presence and flexibility. So, and of course, just walking on the streets of America and Europe, even the stride is different. So I felt I harnessed these vocabularies and I call my style Neo-Bharatan.
Okay.
So it is a new way of expressing. So I think of myself as an Indian woman with a global mind. And that is what I choose to, or try to showcase or share or illuminate through the dance.
So is this your theme, or do you have other, what are the themes you like to explore in your choreography?
The themes I work on for my show always begin with an image or a story from the Indian milieu. My themes are women-centric, and they try to take a well-known character from myth or legend or history, and they try and turn it on its head. For instance, let's look at the character of Ahalya from the Ramayana. We see her as a kind of just a silhouette. But if you take Ahalya and the metaphor of stone, you can braid a very interesting narrative. What it is to live with eyes of stone or a heart of stone, or what it is to be, to throw stones, the metaphor itself becomes something. So I work on an image or a metaphor, I build, and quite like or unlike the Indian system, I work with movement first and the music comes next, the sound design comes next. And I always like to have either a director or a choreographer. I don't like to work on myself by myself. I feel that I am better malleable clay, and I'm a better performer, and this way if I have a third eye who's objective and clear, then I can just cut out the clutter. Because sometimes I feel the plus and minus of the Indian dance tradition is we have so much choreography. It's not that, and sometimes we try to do too much, and sometimes by cutting away the clutter, we actually can say much more. So women are the central focus. Sometimes they're not necessarily from India. I can draw from Egyptian or Greek or other kinds of stories. I'm now particularly interested in Aboriginal stories, indigenous stories from Australia, from stories from Africa, Nigeria in particular. The literature and the mythology is so rich. So I'm always constantly looking at adding and collecting stories from my circle of storyteller friends. In terms of working as a soloist or group, I do both, but I prefer to be a soloist because I think that there's a part of me that wants to keep a certain percentage of the work on stage always improvisational, which means that it's up to me in order to be very present and to be creative at the same time, disciplined and free. When I create with a group, I create on the group. I never am dancing with the group. Sometimes I'm linking the group, sometimes I'm the solo storyteller, narrator, Vedic chanter, singer, that kind of role. But I'm very conscious of the fact that the dancers I work with are normally at least 25 years younger than me. And I don't want to insert myself into that vitality and energy of youth. I think many people make the mistake, and I don't want to end up looking ridiculous. So I try to, when I choreograph on dancers, I try to step back and be as unobtrusive as possible. When I'm a soloist on stage, I'm just full on actor and performer.
Okay, good. Now, do you work mostly in India or do you work elsewhere as well?
I work and create in India. This is where I create. This is where I invite my collaborators. And I have many long-term associations with collaborators, musicians, choreographers, visual designers, composers. Many of them live here or around India, but I feel very strongly about creating in Chennai. I feel this is home, this is where I create, and my first audience is here. This is my first premiere, this is the first pulse.
Right.
Many times I have been premiering my work in the thick of the December season. It just got too frantic and got too nerve-wracking for me. But what does happen after the initial premiere in my hometown is then there will be a touring version, which would be probably a little more simplified. I tend to use props, I tend to use a lot of elements that I carry with me. Some of them become too cumbersome, so then one has to design a touring version of the work. And then I think more about will language communicate. I used to worry more about, Tamil won't be understood somewhere, but then I find that there is a certain cadence of the language of that script, whatever it may be, Sanskrit or Tamil or Telugu, and I think that if you present it intelligently, I don't mean super titles, but if you present it intelligently, the audience gets it. Yes. What I have found though is that in India, audience patience has somehow shrunk. And so nobody wants to sit for a 2.5 hour, 3 hour, anything here. So I find that the impatience of audience, the shrinking imagination sometimes I feel, and it is something for me a cause of worry. That one doesn't allow a performance to just breathe, and you need time to breathe. Kathakali, Kudiyattam, those kinds of works especially need that. And so that for me is a concern. And so now you will find that 60 minutes, 65, 75 minutes is normally what Bharatanatyam performances are. And of course the flip side, well, if you can't say what you want to say in 60 minutes, then you don't need to say anything. But there are some traditions that need time. So this is, for me, one of the negative aspects of urban India. And I don't think any place in India is really now untouched by the power of television.
Screen.
Yes, so everybody looks at the screen, looks at the handhelds, looks at the phone, is constantly texting, WhatsApping. And so there's all those issues to me that almost act as mediators and disruptors to an experience of the warmth of the eye, the human body in a space.
Yes, and you have been one of the curators and creators of contemporary dance festival or contemporary music and theater and whatever. What can you say about the contemporary dance field today, apart from your work, outside you have experienced and seen a number of propositions and all. Could you just say a few words about what is going on and how you feel about it?
I think of contemporary dance in India like the dandelion that is coming up through the cracks of hard stone. That there is a group of young people who are just so determined to create and present. Young contemporary theatre and dance makers, and I put them both in a category because theatre is including so much movement and dance is using a lot of spoken text. So young dance and theatre makers are actually negating or pushing aside any of the traditional forms, and they are more influenced by, I would say, European, especially German, and some French maybe, but particularly German. And we have a lot of them carry the politics of space, of class, the politics of the body. They talk about the gaze, the exoticization, a body that refuses to be commodified for entertainment. But with all this activity that's happening in urban India, it is still predominantly contemporary dance and theatre is an urban activity, again for a small group, but it's growing. It's growing because I feel, compared to the classical dance community, which is very large, the contemporary dancers have got their technology together, they're able to disseminate, they're much more professional in the way they think about their work and the way they interact with, say, festival directors and curators. So they're able to speak the language. What is the language that a certain, like the French are very different from what the Germans may want, or maybe what the Dutch want. So it would all depend on what it is. But a lot of it has to do with a very anorexic, thin, almost an anti-Indian body. For me, the Indian body is sensual, it's curved, it has contact with the earth, and a mature body is even more sensual for me. It's not just about youth. So contemporary dance is about, a very, very slim, Western acceptable, Western palatable body, and but they are addressing issues that classical dance does not address, like gender, same-sex love, that they have all, so they're able to address issues of the day.
Is it because they have more freedom in their creativity?
Yes, they definitely feel that they don't have the burden of the Guru Sishya, they don't have the burden of history or sort of mangled history that today's young dancers know. They don't have to bother with that.
Okay, now we are here in a very famous classical institution for dance in India, Kalakshetra. Well, there would be a lot to say about that, but we won't have time now. But my last question would be, do you teach? Do you transmit what you do? Or do you have a school? Do you have an institution? Or do you just travel?
I studied in Kalakshetra. And it was a wonderful experience for me. But I also studied the need to have an open mind, even here in Kalakshetra. And that life and dance need to inform one another. I don't teach with a regular academy. I do not create Arangetram models, but I audition and hire professional dancers for a project, and they will stay with me for 3 years for the project, which means that the project will be created, it will be premiered, and then I will work on a touring.
And yes. You tour mostly in India or all over the world?
Well, my first in India, and then it would depend on what other presenters want. There is a large diaspora. Sometimes I interact with them, sometimes I don't. I pick and choose who the presenters will be. I don't tour as often as many of the other dancers, but I travel a lot because I also go to conferences. Because with my PhD in Women's Studies, I also lecture a lot. I mentor young dancers who want to go from being a dancer to an artist. And I give them, I have young people from all over the world. I take a group of about 7 in a batch and I have them stay with me for at least 18 months. Whether it's Skype, whether it's a project, how do you think through something. And all the principles of Neo-Bharatam that I have created as my personal style, it's not a pedagogy, but it has allowed me to develop processes. So I can actually work with a Buto dancer, or a flamenco dancer, or a contemporary dancer, and any other kind of trained body, and give them processes from the Indian system of thinking. So so that's how I work, and I work with a large number of young people. I also work with young actors.
Not only Indians, if I understand well.
Yes, many. Okay. Japanese, multiracial, anywhere in the world.
Right. Well, would you like to add something to this conversation?
I'm really lucky to be a dancer. I feel it is a great time to be a mature woman in the world when everything is racing towards airbrushed, photoshopped beauty and impossible youth. And I think experience and wisdom that comes from being a juicy crone, I think once you're 60, many pressures fall away. And one worries less about what other people think of you. As a performer, as somebody on stage, every time I set foot on that stage, I still get very nervous. And I would get very worried if I don't get nervous. So I'm very fortunate. My children don't dance, but they have been given enough of the creative gene that they have both gone on to live very different lives. So the idea of being able to create in the moment with your body, I think is a huge gift, both powerful and vulnerable at the same time. I feel very blessed.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.